Oh, my love-hate relationship with this series continues. Not like how much I hate a YouTube auditor, but hey, what can you do? Now, before I even begin, I have to yell at Capcom for a minute about this bullshit. For some brain-fuckingly stupid reason, Capcom did not allow users to copy their data when this game first came out. And by copy, I mean put it on an external drive outside of your PlayStation 3. I can't remember if PlayStation Plus was around back in the day and was fresh and new or whatever the fuck, but I do remember not having the ability to copy this data over to an external drive. Why is that important? Because right before Modern Warfare 2 came out, maybe a few weeks before the release of that game, my original PlayStation 3 fat started dying out. I could tell that shit was struggling. It was making louder and louder sounds. I was losing connection to games. It was shutting down from overheating. So I knew the end was coming from my beloved console. Quickly, I copied all my save data from all my games to an external drive with the exception of one game, Resident Evil 5. The game didn't even let me copy that shit. So I had no way of carrying over save data from this game in case my machine failed. Sure enough, the PlayStation 3 got the yellow light of death. I got my coffin in the mail. I sent it out for service to get fixed and waited. Well, then again, I didn't wait too long because I'm an impatient motherfucker. So I went out and I got me a PlayStation 3 Slim, which is my current machine that I have never had a problem with, and I got my PlayStation Fat in the mail. Was it my old PS3 Fat? No, of course not. It was a new fucking machine that wiped out all my old data. So since that day, I have played my PlayStation 3 Slim as my main console, and my PlayStation 3 Fat has been more of an entertainment unit with the Blu-ray player and shit like that. And I still have the ability to go back and play some of my old PlayStation 2 games if I ever wanted to, because that PlayStation 3 was one of the original motherfuckers with the PlayStation 2 engine up in that bitch. I mean, seriously, I can still go back and play SSX Tricky for days and still not get bored with that shit if I wanted. I don't believe it or not, I still have that fucking game, man. But anyways, because of that stupid-ass decision by Capcom, this was the one game I couldn't copy over to the new console, and I was pissed about it at the time. Not that I give two shits about it now, because obviously it's been 5 years since this game was played, but it pissed me off at that time. I didn't have a major library back in the day, so obviously if I wanted to play a game all over again, I wanted to be able to play it. In any event, let's get on to my relationship with Resident Evil. You either love their games or you hate what they have done to them. Now, I've been around the series since the beginning, and anyone that has been around since the beginning probably has a few beefs with this series, and most importantly, some games in particular. Now, I remember watching my buddy playing the original Resident Evil on his PlayStation 1. I was still on fucking Super Nintendo back in the day. I was playing Tecmo Baseball. I didn't really give a shit. But I remember him getting the shit scared out of him playing Resident Evil 1, and when I went out and I bought my PlayStation 1, I bought it for Final Fantasy 7 and shit like that, I got Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 at the same exact time, so those were the first 3 games that I had on my original PlayStation 1. I loved all of those games, in particular the Resident Evil games. Resident Evil, the original, set the tone for the series and the franchise. Resident Evil 2 catapulted the series into stardom, and the popularity of that game made the survival horror genre popular. This wasn't the first game or the first franchise in survival horror, but it was the most popular. It was the most successful, and I had a shitload of fun playing the first 2. When Part 3 came out, Nemesis, or whatever the fuck they wanted to call that shit, I didn't even know about it. My same friend who played Resident Evil 1, he got the game, played it, said it sucked. So I borrowed it, played it, thought it was just mediocre, not going to give a review to that fucking game. We'll just say it was no Resident Evil 2. After that game, the shit went all over the place. Resident Evil Survivor, Resident Evil Chronicles, Resident Evil 0, Dead Aim Survivor. Holy fuck, every fucking platform was getting their version of the watered down game. The next game I got in the series was Code Veronica. Overall, not a bad game, but like many who played the series, it started feeling stale. It felt like the same. The scares were the same. The whole find the red key to open the blue door, to unlock the yellow stone that fits in the blue vase, to open a secret door to find the white midget that has access to the champagne room. Oh, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit, man. Zombies are taking over the fucking planet, and some motherfucker has time to hide shit in a reverse scavenger hunt all over the fucking place, man. It was bullshit, and it got fucking boring. Then, Resident Evil 4 came out on GameCube, a console I never purchased, by the way, and it received critical acclaim. Yes, the game came to other consoles years later, but I never bought it, and only sparingly played it at a friend's house and never finished the actual game. So when Resident Evil 5 was announced, I debated about buying it. The last numbered game I personally bought was Resident Evil 2 all the way back on PlayStation 1. I played Part 3, I didn't like it. I played Part 4, I had Code Veronica, but obviously that's not part of the numbered series. So I figured it was time to jump back into this motherfucker. Resident Evil 4 changed the genre and improved on the series to become a critical success. So I figured it was time to return to Resident Evil, and I bought Resident Evil 5. And overall, I like the game, but it's not an amazing game. It still has the feel of all those older games, but this time it just feels like a swarm of zombies coming after you over and over and over again. It sort of lost the elements of survival horror that made the gameplay of the original so damn good, and it's combined more of the action pace of Resident Evil 4. It also added a second player with you for about 90% of the fucking game. You know, unlike the prior Resident Evil games, the majority of the gameplay was solo. You running around, running away from enemies, and you only get some co-op help in the game from the AI every now and then. It was odd. It was rare. This game, though, it's all co-op, whether you're playing with AI or you're actually playing two-person co-op. And oddly enough, I played the majority of this game in two-player co-op. The main person who helped me out was one of my subscribers, I Am Shady, and she carried me through this game with all her unlocks and secrets and shit. I ain't gonna lie, man. Since she finished the game before I did and unlocked a whole bunch of crap before I did, she had like fucking unlimited magnum ammo, unlimited rockets, whatever the fuck. Basically, I was just along for the ride. She showed me how to do the puzzle, she showed me where the collectibles were, she was launching rockets at the bosses and finishing them off in one kill and shit like that. So obviously when I finished the game and I got to do my run-throughs, the game was pretty fucking easy. She unlocked all her shit, and when I played, I unlocked all of that shit. So naturally, I went back and I finally did a solo campaign, but man, this game was fucking easy after that. I'll tell you right now, when we played, I almost did nothing. I mean, I just sat back and watched her kick the shit out of everything in the game and pretty much just watched the cinematics and all that other crap. But anyway, by the end of the game, it feels like your typical Resident Evil story. Some dickhead wants to use the virus to either kill the world or make money off of it, or both. And in this game, it was Wesker as the bad guy all over again, as if we haven't seen this motherfucker how many times over. However, this series finally kills his ass off in a lava pit. So, the motherfucker is gone. For now, because we all know they'll somehow revive his stupid ass, because obviously this is a zombie game. Motherfuckers come back to life somehow. You know, they'll probably relate that shit to his kid or whatever the fuck they had in Resident Evil 6. Either way, man, the story comes across with the usual mutation of the virus, and it's up to you to stop the outbreak again. It's simple, it's familiar, it's worn out. It hasn't changed much in the 15 years the franchise has been around, and although the gameplay has changed over the course of its lifetime, the plot always remains. Another thing that hasn't changed since Resident Evil 1 is the controls, and this is something that needs to be overhauled completely. I'm not sure how things were in Resident Evil 6 because I didn't get the game, but Resident Evil 5 controls feel like the same shit I played years and years ago in Resident Evil 1. The controls are rigid and awkward as shit. It almost feels like everything you need to do in this game requires you to press 2 buttons. You want to run? 2 buttons. You want to knife something? 2 buttons. On top of that, the controls of the player feel sluggish at all times. You feel slow. That's the only way I can describe this shit. You always feel like a slow, sluggish motherfucker. You know, part of the problem is that Resident Evil has never adapted to the third-person shooter style of games as of today. Back in the days of Resident Evil 1, they introduced its dynamic camera angles and shit that were used in parts of the game to make it feel unique. You know, they give you these crazy angles that could be used to hide something, to scare the shit out of you, whatever the fuck. The controls, though, felt clunky and awkward to use. The camera angle would switch around and would fuck up your orientation all the time. It was cool to look at, but it was a pain in the ass to actually control. Over time, they removed a good portion of those dynamic camera angles and shit like that, but they still haven't adopted the universally used fixed camera over the character's shoulder. So Resident Evil 5 looks like a third-person shooter, plays like a third-person shooter, but has the controls and movements of a 15-year-old game. It's a pain in the ass. The characters feel like they're moving in quicksand, combined with no ability to walk backwards or any kind of fixed camera angles, and you have these outdated sensor controls. It needs to be updated to 2015. This isn't 1998 anymore, motherfuckers. I need something that feels like PlayStation 4, not PlayStation 1. And speaking of Resident Evil 6, when it was released not too long ago, most of the critique of the game went towards things that people have been saying about this game for the longest time. It's old and it's stale. I didn't get Resident Evil because it just feels like a never-ending story. You never feel any closure with the story of these games because they always leave something open-ending or they leave a plot device to keep the franchise going. After playing Resident Evil 5 and feeling the content was old, my logic was that Resident Evil is probably going to be more of the same unless they somehow change the formula up a bit. And as you saw by the reviews, they did not change the formula up at all. And it's something I think Capcom finally realizes. After the reviews of Resident Evil 6 compared to Resident Evil 5, after the sales figures slowed down, Capcom realizes they need to rehaul this game like Resident Evil 4. They need some more life in the game or something. They need more survival horror. I don't know what the fuck it is. I used to love me some Resident Evil, but to be honest, the game is completely unrecognizable from the mansion in Raccoon City that started all. It mutated from a small horror story that it was contained in one town to a bloated plot that now spans the world. You know, maybe the game needs a gameplay reboot or even a plot reboot. Just start over from scratch. But it needs something. I don't know if it needs a total overhaul, but they have to do something with Resident Evil 7 or whatever the fuck the next game is because it feels stale. It needs to find a way to convince fans that the game is not going to be the same shit over and over and over again every single year with the same old controls, the same old scares, the same old stale boss fights. It needs to do something. And I can't ever say if they're going to do it. I can't say if Capcom finally is going to realize they need something new, but the game has to change. It has to give me something worthy of my money to buy this motherfucker, and that is the only way I'll ever buy this game again or this franchise again. I need it to change. Please, Capcom, change this motherfucker, man. Anyways, that does it for this week's versions of Goodbye PlayStation 3 games. Next week, we're going to do a whole nother series, and it's actually going to be all of these PlayStation exclusives that I have in my list. So you guys are going to get to see some good, some bad, but all of it will be PlayStation 3 exclusive games. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.